We can pay her half your salary, Malcolm chuckled, leaning back in his ergonomic chair. It's just business, Dana. Nothing personal. I stared at him across the desk, the birthday balloon one of my team members had tied to my chair earlier still bobbing quietly behind me. The shock must have shown on my face, because he quickly added, Look, Vanessa's been here 6 months now. You've trained her well. The logistics integration system runs smoothly, and frankly, we don't need 2 people doing the same job. She knows the basics, I said slowly, keeping my voice as steady as I could. But she doesn't understand the back-end architecture, the legacy systems, the override protocols. Malcolm waved his hand like he was shooing away a fly. It's all in the manuals, right? That's what I pay you for. Besides, young talent brings a fresh mindset. The industry's moving fast. We've got to keep up. My name is Dana Fletcher. I'm 45, and up until 5 minutes ago, I was the senior systems analyst at Aerologix Freight Solutions in Nashville. For nearly 4 years, I'd maintained and evolved the intricate system that coordinated shipping data, customs regulations, and international tracking across multiple platforms, keeping cargo moving for clients in over a dozen countries. When Malcolm brought in Vanessa 6 months ago, I had no reason to feel threatened. The workload had become overwhelming, and I welcomed the help. I spent long days and quiet weekends walking her through procedures and documentation. But there hadn't been time to show her the deep system logic, the hidden code dependencies and patchwork that held it all together. I need your badge and login credentials before the day ends, Malcolm said, sliding a severance folder across the desk. 2 weeks' pay, standard non-disclosure. HR has everything lined up. I scanned the document. The words blurred slightly. Today's my birthday, I said. It sounded so small, so irrelevant. Malcolm winced. Sorry. HR handles the schedule. I signed. Then I stood. Vanessa will need the failover procedure for when the satellite sync stalls, I said. It's not in the documentation. She'll manage, Malcolm said, already scrolling through his phone. She's sharp. As I boxed up my things, Vanessa approached with an awkward half-smile. I'm really sorry, Dana. I didn't know. I nodded and handed her my personal system binder. A notification pinged on my screen. Sync failure. Cargo flow Pacific region. Manual override required. I opened my mouth to explain, but Malcolm appeared again, ushering me toward the elevator. She's got this, he said. It's time for you to go. I looked at Vanessa, then smiled. Good luck, I said. And I meant it more than she or Malcolm could ever understand. My journey to Aerologix came after 2 decades designing systems for banks, logistics firms, and finally, global freight. I specialized in building structures that didn't fail, because failure could mean lost millions or, worse, delayed medicine or food for people depending on it. When Aerologix recruited me, their old system was a disaster. Within months, I'd rebuilt it from the ground up, stabilizing data flow, syncing complex APIs, and bringing client satisfaction to an all-time high. And just like that, on my birthday, with a balloon still floating above my now-empty chair, it was over. Aerologix had recently secured 3 international freight contracts with pharmaceutical companies, deals worth millions, largely due to the strength of the data integration solutions I had developed from the ground up. My systems had become the backbone of Aerologix's growing logistics tech reputation. About a year ago, Malcolm Barrett became my direct manager after our longtime director took early retirement. He had a background in sales and operations, not systems architecture, which gave me pause at first. But I tried to stay open-minded. He talked a lot about streamlining, optimization, and agility, and often questioned why our systems had so many checkpoints. These cross-validations seem excessive, he'd say during review meetings. Couldn't we trim the fat a little? I'd explained patiently each time that what looked like redundancy was actually our system's strength, layered verification that caught errors before they could ripple into global shipments or customs filings. We were dealing with medications, temperature-sensitive materials, and regulatory flags. One misstep could cost lives or millions. Malcolm would nod thoughtfully, but it was clear he didn't fully grasp the architectural complexity. Still, I believed our opposing strengths, his business acumen, my technical expertise, made us a solid team. When he hired Vanessa, fresh out of a local university with a computer science degree and bright-eyed ambition, I didn't push back. She was eager, energetic, and a quick study when it came to the routine processes. But she'd sometimes balk at the detail work. "Do we really need to run all these validation scripts?" she once asked. "They add nearly an hour. That hour prevents days, maybe weeks of cleanup," I'd tell her. "This system looks stable, but it's more fragile than you'd think." Lately, I'd noticed Malcolm and Vanessa meeting frequently behind closed doors. I assumed he was mentoring her, maybe preparing her for greater responsibility. I even prepped advanced documentation, thinking she'd be taking over some of my recurring tasks soon. What I hadn't seen coming was my complete replacement. Looking back, the clues were all there: Malcolm's sudden fixation on simplification, his constant questions about documentation, my quiet removal from high-level meetings. But I was too focused on improving the architecture and coaching Vanessa to realize I was digging my own grave. The morning after I was terminated, I woke up to a flood of LinkedIn notifications. Word had spread fast. 3 former colleagues reached out, expressing shock and asking if I was exploring new roles. I spent most of the day refreshing my resume, researching roles in logistics tech, and reminding myself that my value didn't end with Aerologics. By dinner, I'd already scheduled 2 interviews for the coming week. The freight data integration niche was small, and seasoned architects like me didn't stay unemployed for long. Then my phone buzzed. It was Lucas, a junior developer from my old team. "Dana, I know it's probably not the best time," he said, clearly flustered. "But I'm stuck. The Pacific Pharma sync is throwing errors post-update. I tried everything in your notes. Nothing works." I paused, immediately recalling the alert I'd seen before I was ushered out. "Did you run the validation on the backup sync tables?" "Yeah, but nothing reconciles." Vanessa said just override the flag and push it through, but that seems risky. I closed my eyes. "Don't. You'll corrupt the entire data chain." "That's what I thought," he said, voice tense. "I told Malcolm we should call you," Lucas sighed. "But he said we needed to handle it internally." I offered some guidance, just enough to help, careful not to violate the confidentiality clause in the severance agreement I'd signed. When I hung up, I felt a strange cocktail of vindication and worry. I hadn't built Aerologics' data framework to be bulletproof because I thought I'd always be around. I'd done it because the system was delicate, interdependent, and handled vital information that couldn't afford to break. That night, 2 more calls came from different team members. Each described new, worsening problems. Vanessa, it seemed, had forced a global override after all, not understanding the domino effect it would trigger. Client dashboards were misreporting cargo locations, customs entries weren't syncing, and internal validation logs were throwing red flags by the minute. I ignored the 4th call. It came from Malcolm's number just before midnight. By morning, I was already in a tailored blazer, sitting in an interview with Transpharma Logistics, one of Aerologics' main competitors. The hiring manager reviewed my portfolio with interest. "Impressive background," he said. "Why did you leave Aerologics?" "Restructuring," I said, calm and composed. "They opted to streamline operations." He raised an eyebrow. "Interesting. We've heard Aerologics is experiencing major system issues, something about cargo discrepancies and customs delays." I kept my face neutral. "I wouldn't know. I'm no longer involved." By Wednesday, I had 2 formal offers, both with significantly higher salaries than what I'd earned at Aerologics. A 3rd company reached out, referencing my architecture work and asking to schedule a meeting at your earliest convenience. Meanwhile, my phone continued to light up with missed calls, Malcolm, Vanessa, even numbers I didn't recognize. I didn't return any of them. There was no clause in my severance agreement requiring post-employment assistance, and I certainly wasn't obligated to clean up the mess they'd made. But by Thursday morning, curiosity got the better of me. When Malcolm called again, I picked up on the first ring. "Dana," he said, breathless with relief. "Thank God. We have a situation." "So I've heard," I replied coolly. "I'll be direct. The system is in complete meltdown. After Monday's sync error, everything spiraled. Client dashboards are showing wrong data, customs protocols aren't firing correctly, and our regulatory flagging system is throwing compliance errors left and right." I closed my eyes, picturing the disaster, the very nightmare scenario I'd built layers of protection to prevent. "Malcolm, I signed a severance agreement. I'm not your employee. I know, but we want to bring you back as a consultant. Name your rate. We just need you to fix this." The offer was tempting. Not for the money, but for the validation. "If I agree," I said slowly, "I need full access. No red tape. Total autonomy." "Of course," he said instantly. "Whatever you need. I'll think about it and call you back this afternoon." After hanging up, I called Lucas to get a more honest view of the chaos. "It's bad, Dana," he said quietly. "Pharmadine's threatening to cancel their contract. That's 30% of Aerologix's revenue. People are panicking." I looked out the window, Nashville's skyline glowing in the distance. They'd underestimated me, and now they needed me more than ever. Potential legal action if cargo manifests and customs filings have been compromised. That line from Lucas stayed with me. I spent the morning weighing my options. The professional in me wanted to salvage the system I'd poured years into perfecting. But the human in me? She felt a twinge of satisfaction at Malcolm's desperation. By noon, I'd made my decision and called him back. "I'll help," I said. "My consulting rate is $300 an hour, minimum 40 hours, payable up front." Malcolm didn't even blink. "Done. When can you start?" "I'll be there in an hour." Walking back into Aerologix felt surreal. Familiar faces looked up from desks, some with genuine relief, others with the kind of cautious curiosity reserved for a ghost returning from the dead. Malcolm hovered close, but kept his distance. Vanessa was nowhere to be seen. "Where's Vanessa?" I asked as he led me to a workstation. "She called in sick," he said, avoiding eye contact. "Stress, maybe?" I logged in with the temporary admin credentials he provided and immediately began triage. The damage was worse than I'd expected, but followed a clear pattern, exactly what happens when someone overrides safety protocols without understanding the core system structure. By late afternoon, I had stabilized the most critical operations and drafted a recovery plan. Malcolm checked in often, each time looking more relieved. "You're a lifesaver," he said at one point. I don't know what we were thinking. I didn't bother replying. As I packed up to leave, Malcolm approached with a folder in hand. "I've been authorized to offer you your job back," he said, sliding the documents across the desk. 15% raise. Senior systems lead. I glanced at the offer letter but didn't touch it. "I'll consider it after we resolve the crisis." He nodded. "Of course. Take your time." But as I gathered my things, I noticed an open email on his laptop beside me. The subject line, "Transition Plan, once system stabilized." The preview read, "Make sure everything is fully documented this time so the next transition is seamless." A chill ran through me. This wasn't a job offer based on merit, it was a trap. They needed me to patch the ship and map the controls so they could hand it off to someone else again. The next morning, I arrived early. The system was responding well to my corrections. 2, maybe 3 more days, and it would be back to full capacity. I documented each step, not for Malcolm, but for myself. Around midday, Victoria Winters, the CEO, stopped by my station. "Dana, we're beyond grateful for what you're doing," she said, smiling. "Malcolm speaks very highly of you." I nodded, still typing. "The system should be stable by Monday." "Wonderful. I hear Malcolm's talked to you about returning permanently." He mentioned it. Her smile tightened. We'd love to have you back. Perhaps we can discuss the details over lunch. Perhaps. After she left, I stepped outside for air. Scrolling through my phone, a text popped up from an unknown number. Dana, it's Vanessa. Can we talk? It's important. Curious, I agreed to meet her at the cafe across the street during lunch. When I arrived, she was already there, nervously clutching a cup of coffee. Vanessa sat there pale and visibly shaken, her hands wrapped tightly around her coffee cup. Thank you for meeting me, she said as I sat down. I've been debating whether or not to tell you this. Tell me what? I asked, instantly alert. She glanced around before leaning in. The system failure. It wasn't entirely accidental. My spine stiffened. Go on. Malcolm asked me last week to make some optimizations to the system, she said, voice trembling. He claimed you'd approved the concept, but hadn't had time to implement it. I never approved any changes, I said sharply, heart pounding. I figured that out later, she admitted. When everything started going sideways Monday morning, I told Malcolm we needed to call you immediately. He refused. Said calling you would just prove your system was overly complicated. He insisted we could handle it without you. Vanessa pulled out her phone and showed me a text thread. It was from Malcolm, dated Monday morning. In it, he clearly instructed her to make adjustments without notifying me, even as her replies grew more frantic about the cascading errors. I was having panic attacks by Monday night, she whispered. I couldn't sleep, knowing how badly we'd messed up, knowing I trusted him. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Tears welled up in her eyes. Because HR called me yesterday. They said there's an internal investigation about unauthorized system modifications. Malcolm told them I acted on my own, that I made changes against his instructions. Everything clicked into place like a lock snapping shut. Malcolm had tried to undercut my architecture, prove his streamlined ideas worked better. When it failed, he brought me back to fix it, temporarily. Then he planned to pin the collapse on Vanessa and walk away looking like the leader who handled a crisis. I was supposed to accept a job at Transpharma last week, she said. Now Malcolm's threatening to tank my reference if I leave. Says I'll never work in freight data again. I clenched my jaw. I'd come back just to stabilize the system, earn my consulting fee, and move on. But now? I couldn't just walk away. Vanessa was inexperienced, but she didn't deserve this. No one did. Forward me those messages, I said, my voice steady. And anything else you've got. Emails, call logs. All of it. As she began compiling the evidence, I formed a new plan. My consulting work would continue, but alongside it, I was preparing a different kind of fix. One for the workplace culture that enabled people like Malcolm. I remembered something Jacob had mentioned last year. Every system change was automatically recorded on our compliance server. Audit trails, time-stamped logs required by law. That evening, while the office was quiet, I logged into the secure server. Within minutes, I found it, proof that Malcolm had used his admin override to authorize major structural changes to the verification protocols, changes that directly contradicted existing documentation. The final nail? He had backdated the approvals to make it look like they'd been sanctioned weeks earlier, before the problems began. Appear as though the changes had been pending for weeks, implying my quiet approval. I downloaded the logs onto a secure external drive, then sent myself an encrypted email with the files attached, just in case. For good measure, I took screenshots showing the original timestamps and the backdated authorizations, annotated with internal user IDs. Now, I needed to determine who else was involved. Had Victoria known about Malcolm's sabotage? Or was she just complicit in using the disaster as a convenient excuse to bring me back temporarily? I wasn't sure, until I noticed something on Malcolm's laptop during our afternoon check-in. A notification flashed across the corner of the screen. Calendar, 4:30 p.m., discuss AC transition plan with VW. I'll need another hour or so on the customs regulatory module, I told him. You go ahead to your meeting. He didn't question it. Once he left, I wrapped up the module fixes and then installed one final, invisible diagnostic safeguard. It would silently monitor the core architecture for unauthorized alterations and send alerts directly to my personal email. Not exactly part of my consulting scope, but I justified it as part of my professional responsibility. At 5:15 p.m., I packed up for the weekend. The system was nearly 80% restored, with only minor discrepancies I could handle remotely. As I passed the glass-walled conference room on my way out, I slowed just enough to overhear. "But she's fixing everything," Malcolm insisted. "Can't we at least wait until Monday?" Victoria's voice was crisp, cold. "The decision is made. Once she submits her final documentation, we thank her and proceed with the transition. Vanessa was just a trial run. We've identified another junior developer who'll maintain the new architecture at even less cost. If it fails again, it won't matter. Dana will have documented everything." I didn't wait to hear more. I slipped away unnoticed, strangely calm. I had all the evidence I needed, and now a weekend to decide exactly how to use it. By Sunday night, Malcolm texted, "System stable. Just need final documentation tomorrow. CEO wants to meet at 9 a.m. I replied simply, "I'll be there." What Malcolm didn't know was that I'd spent the weekend consulting with both a labor attorney and a regulatory compliance specialist at the FDA. The moment I explained what had happened, they'd grown very serious. Manipulating systems connected to pharmaceutical logistics, especially those involved in international drug shipments, wasn't just unethical. It was potentially criminal. I'd also formally accepted the offer from Transpharma Logistics, with one stipulation: I'd start after I wrapped up some final unfinished business. Monday morning arrived, gray and humid. I walked into Aerologix's headquarters right at 9 a.m., carrying a slim leather portfolio. Inside were my consulting invoice, my resignation letter, and a small packet of documents, evidence, carefully arranged. Victoria's assistant escorted me to the same conference room. Waiting inside were Victoria, Malcolm, and two unfamiliar faces. One was a woman in a sharply tailored suit from HR, the other a nervous-looking man with a legal pad. "Dana," Victoria said smoothly, "thank you for coming. This is Patricia from HR and Jonathan from our legal department. They'll help finalize the conclusion of your consulting engagement." I smiled politely. Perfect timing. I brought a few documents myself, ones your legal department might want to review. Before anyone could respond, the conference room door opened again. Jacob walked in, followed closely by Vanessa and two men in dark suits who definitely didn't work for Aerologix. Victoria rose halfway from her seat. "What is the meaning of this?" "I invited a few additional participants," I said calmly, sliding my portfolio onto the conference table. "Jacob and Vanessa have first-hand knowledge relevant to our discussion. And these gentlemen are from the FDA's Office of Regulatory Compliance. They're particularly interested in the events of the last week." The blood drained from Malcolm's face. "The FDA? This is an internal company issue." Actually, one of the agents interjected, "When systems managing pharmaceutical logistics and customs compliance are tampered with, especially those tied to active pharmaceutical contracts, it becomes a federal matter. Ms. Fletcher contacted us with evidence suggesting serious compliance violations." I opened the folder and began distributing copies of my full report. It detailed the architecture I had built, the unauthorized changes that had been pushed through using Malcolm's override access, and the cover-up, complete with backdated approvals and attempts to mislead regulatory systems. The final page contained my signed statement and certification. "This is my final documentation," I said as I slid the original across to Victoria. "As requested. I've also accepted a position with Transpharma Logistics, starting tomorrow. My first project will be assisting any former Aerologix clients who wish to migrate their data to a more stable and compliant platform." Victoria's calm veneer cracked. "You can't do this. These clients are under contract." Contracts, I replied, with explicit data integrity guarantees. Guarantees you've now breached. My attorney has already reviewed the clauses in detail. As the FDA agents began questioning Malcolm and Victoria about internal change management and compliance protocol violations, I quietly stood. Jacob and Vanessa followed. My work here was done. Underscore 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 underscore. 6 months later, I sat in my corner office at Transpharma's Nashville branch, reviewing the quarterly report. The transition of over a dozen former Aerologics clients had gone smoothly, better than I'd projected, thanks in no small part to Jacob and Vanessa, both of whom were now valued members of my team. On my desk lay an industry newsletter with a small blurb buried on the back page. Aerologics Freight Solutions has been acquired following a sharp decline in client retention and mounting regulatory concerns. Key executives Malcolm Barrett and Victoria Winters have since moved on to other roles following a federal investigation. My phone buzzed with a reminder, video call at 2 p.m. with our newest pharmaceutical client, Aerologics' former flagship account. Their head of research had personally requested I oversee their systems architecture going forward. As I prepared, Vanessa knocked on my open door. "Just wanted to remind you," she said, grinning, "celebration dinner tonight. 1 year since we all started here." I smiled, remembering how I had negotiated both Jacob and Vanessa's inclusion in my employment agreement. The CEO had been hesitant until I explained their integrity, loyalty, and the critical role they played in exposing the violations. I wouldn't miss it, I told her. Just then, my email chimed, a diagnostic update. All systems across our network had completed their integrity checks successfully. Some might have called what happened revenge. But I didn't see it that way. It was accountability. And I'd do it again. It wasn't revenge. It was the natural consequence of valuing systems over the people who built them, of chasing short-term savings at the expense of experience and integrity. In the end, I didn't have to bring down Aerologics. Their own short-sighted decisions did that all on their own. I closed the performance report and stood, smoothing my blazer. A new client awaited, ready to invest in stability and expertise. And I was more than ready to show them, once again, the power of doing things the right way, from the ground up. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to relive, but it was necessary because stories like mine happen every day to people who are quietly doing their best, building systems, teams, or even families, only to be undervalued and replaced the moment convenience or cost-cutting comes knocking. If you've ever felt discarded or betrayed in the workplace, I see you. And I hope my story reminds you that your value isn't defined by the people who failed to recognize it. I'd love to hear what you think. Drop a comment below. What would you have done in my shoes? Do you believe I made the right call by confronting the truth head-on and walking away with my integrity intact? Would you have taken the job back or walked for good like I did? And if I can leave you with one piece of advice, it's this. Document everything, trust your instincts, and never let someone else write your ending. Loyalty is a beautiful thing, but only when it's mutual. Don't stay somewhere just because it's familiar or because you've poured years into it. If they can replace you without a second thought, then you owe it to yourself to build something new, with people who see your worth. You are not disposable. Your experience, your wisdom, and your resilience are powerful assets. Own them. Stand by them. And when the moment comes, and it will come, be ready to prove, not to them, but to yourself, that you never needed their approval to succeed. Let's talk in the comments. I'm listening. Dana Fletcher.